Well, hello, viewers and listeners to the Mind, Body, Spirit Network High Vibe Tribe Q&A interview today. And today we really have a awesome guest. You're going to want to listen in on this, especially if you kind of can be mesmerized by some incredible storytelling, healing storytelling. And this is, I read some testimonials about our guest speaker today. And all of the testimonials are like, oh my God, so much. The storytelling was incredible. The healing was incredible just by listening to her. So today I'm welcoming Miss Gemma B. Benton. She's a traditional Native American singer, spiritual activist, mixed media artist. I love mixed media, by the way, and I saw some of your work. Oh my God. You are my sister from another mother. Gemma is also a storyteller and the coordinator for the Healing Story Alliance. Like I said, healing stories, we're getting a little of that today. Through her transformational art workshops, Gemma shares stories and wisdom gathered during her 27 years of working in Native American and Indigenous communities. She's the creator of the Ancestors Journey, an online creative course that uses storytelling, sacred song, art, and ritual to empower people to heal the wounds passed down through the generations by our ancestors. She and her husband live in the Sacramento, California area, where they spend their free time participating in cultural projects, restorative justice, and interfaith community programs and spiritual activism. Together, they enjoy art and music and being in nature. So, Gemma, I didn't tell you, I'm in the Aspen, Colorado area. And it's the native land for Northern Ute Indians. And we have a lot of Native American drumming circles, ceremonies, sweat lodge, all that type of stuff going on here. And it's really quite beautiful. So welcome, woman. And I just want to tell our audience here that I'm an affiliate partner of the Shift Network, and Gemma is one of their presenters coming up this week. And I really wanted to get her in here because were you part of the Ancestral Healing Summit also, Gemma?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you, I was, I do online marketing for the network, and I understand, I'm a healer and I'm a kind of a techno marketing geek. But I was looking at the response to the Healing Summit. People showing interest in that was significantly higher than other things.
Oh, wow.
So there's something going on in that realm that people are starting to connect. They're asking, a lot of us don't know what we're asking for. I mean, we're asking for something, but it shows up and you're like, oh, I got to check this out. So just super interesting to know. I figured you were part of that, but I wanted to let you know that what I see in my data, my dry linear data, is like huge spike on my website for that particular summit. So just so you know. So my dear, you please must tell us a little bit more about yourself and who you help and how you came about doing this for almost 30 years, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Liz, for doing what you're doing. And, we were talking about just before the call about answering the call, right? Like about showing up. And thank you for showing up. Thank you for doing, figuring out how to do the healing and the techno. I'm kind of one of those people too. It takes a lot to do it, but, it's a necessary thing. And we need spiritual people behind everything that we're doing so that we can get these messages out. So I'm grateful for you and all that you're doing and for your audience and listening in and sharing being a part of everything that's happening now. We really are living in such exciting times, and it's an honor to be part of the Ancestral Healing, the Shift Network, and all that they're doing. I'm loving hearing that the numbers went up. Yay! And I guess, I was just talking with a friend that, because I was kind of getting hints about that, but I didn't know what the actual numbers were. And I was telling her that just a few years ago, no one ever even knew what ancestral healing was. Like, what's that?
I know.
Yeah. So to me, it's so exciting, you
Yes.
know? Yeah, absolutely. So I got started in this work. Really, I feel like I've done it all my life. And I know that people say that all the time, but I really do believe this is the work that I was shaped for, Liz.
Mhm.
So I will say that I am Menominee and Filipino. I am an Air Force brat. So that means that I grew up here, there, and everywhere. And in large part, that's the start of my story, right? So as an Air Force brat, we move in places and we feel parts of communities, parts of people, and then we move away and we're separated from those people. And I did that story over and over and over again. And all the military brats out there can tell you that this is something that we repeat in our lives. So that was my first lesson, my first learning, and what it is to be part of a community, part of a place, and then be removed from it, and then do it again, and then do it again, and do it again. So what happens is as you go through those experiences, it shapes you. And I learned to be multicultural, cross-cultural, at the same time not belonging to any one culture. And the culture really that I belonged to was displacement, um, and fragmentation, really. So, and my father was an alcoholic. He was a rageaholic. God bless him. He had learned that as part of the military. That's part of what they have to do to survive that kind of violence, right? So to go into a place and to, you know, to have to defend themselves, to have to do what they do, you have to have a certain amount of, psychological, spiritual armor on, right? There has to be a certain amount of numbing. And this is part of how I grew up. And I began anesthetizing myself through alcohol and drugs at a very, very young age, unbelievably young age. So I would go into the refrigerator and drink.
How
Um,
young, Gemma?
oh, really young, like unbelievable. Like I remember in
Elementary
kindergarten.
school?
Yes,
Wow.
yes. Like
Gee.
drinking a pitcher of screwdrivers because they were so delicious. They were
Wow,
wonderful.
that's true.
They were like yum. And my
I know.
dad looking at me like, wow, and she's standing up. So, like, how did that happen? So long story short, I went through a lot there in all of that. And somewhere about 16 years old, decided I needed to get clean and sober. At that time, it was one of those things like people didn't, unless you were, really bad, nobody really talked about how do you get clean and sober. And so I started, through spirituality. I had gone to church as a little girl with a neighbor lady, but really, and even then the ancestors were present. So in this particular, segment of church, it was Pentecostal. We would sit up we would pray on our knees all night. And I remember the spirits of the ancestors around me at that particular time. And, praying all night, but I didn't have language for it. Right.
Right.
So long story short, I got clean and sober. I got married. I had, kids. I became an addictions counselor. And what I went into addictions counseling, wanting to understand why all of this? Why is this society so wounded and so much in need of numbing and anesthetizing? Why do we do that? And in recovery programs, 12-step programs, we talk about a spiritual wound. We
Okay.
don't talk too much about spiritual healing. We talk a lot about therapy. We talk about treatment. We talk about having a higher power, but we don't talk about spiritual healing. So in my 20s, I decided I wanted to understand what spiritual healing actually was. And I thought, well, if anybody knows that answer, it might be my ancestors. It might be them that know. And so I started looking in places and trying to understand what the ancestors, like who are the ancestors and what do they know about healing? And like you say, I ended up in a strong Native community, and that was based around ceremony. And so I got to be immersed in that healing, traditional healing atmosphere.
Wow.
And so I spent, the next, well, and still are part of the Native community and traditional healing as a response to intergenerational and historical trauma. So when we talk about war, when we talk about violence, when we talk about genocide, right, the way that we respond as Native communities is to, we use that as part of our treatment method. So, a veteran coming back, what we know in science now is that both Native and non-Native respond well to traditional sweat lodges, that there is something about the music and the beat of the drum. There is something about being in those womb-like, dark, safe places. There is something about being held in those places of safety and feeling warm and what we call, like they call in trauma treatment, liminal spaces. So spaces between spaces, between time and space. So being in those places through ceremony is our treatment for all of the trauma. Science is catching up with us around the field of epigenetics, and guys like that were on the Ancestral Healing Summit, like Greg Braden, talk about, and he's amazing. And God bless him for all of his scientific mind, because we needed his mind to push that forward on the scientific front, so we could have the science behind it to validate it in other ways. But Native peoples, indigenous peoples, have been doing this for thousands of years and response directly to trauma. So it was really in learning about those places that prepared me to do work with the ancestors.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I'd like to chime in just for a second here, because
absolutely.
I study consciousness and the research of consciousness through Dr. David Hawkins. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. You have? Okay.
Yeah.
So he calibrates different levels of consciousness and where true power exists. And he has like a dozen books, and one of them is called Truth versus Falsehood, where he calibrates things in the world to put in context where true power and healing exists and where destruction exists.
Right.
But one of his calibrations was of a sweat lodge ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
Calibrated extremely high. I think it's like 590 or 600 on the map of consciousness, which is huge.
Mm-hmm.
True healing begins at 540 on the map of consciousness. So you're in the realm of huge power. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
So I just wanted to bring that up. And when you're talking about ancestral healing, is it like ancestry of the human race, or is it immediate ancestry, or is it all of it?
Yes, all of it. All of it. All
okay.
Of it.
Because I want to get personal and individual and share my little story that's all about me, but anyway.
No, we want to hear that.
Okay.
We want to hear that, Liz. And so it is about, the individual. It's about us here. And then it's about all of us. So there's this metaphor that in our ceremonies, everything's done in a circle. So we, stand around, our ceremonies in circles, each of us holding our place. Like I might stand here, you're standing to the left of me, and I'm doing my personal and you're doing your personal. And then there's the we, right? There's all of us standing in that circle.
Okay.
And that's such an important metaphor in this work of ancestral healing that I feel like on the planet right now. So you and I were talking about like the importance of all of us answering the call, like showing up and holding our place. So I show up in the circle and, I hold my place, you show up in the circle. If somebody doesn't get the call to the left of you or isn't paying attention or feels like they're not enough, right, doubts their significance, we've got a hole in the circle. We've got a hole in the circle that's meant just for them,
right,
for their story, for their ancestors. And they bring all of their ancestors into that circle.
Okay.
So it's about you, about us, about all of it.
Okay. So
yeah.
Well, then I'm going to ask you this question. I want to share the story because it's important.
Yeah.
And it's important for women for sure. And you mentioned something that, well, let me tell you my story. I'll make it quick because I want to talk to you more, but it's related. It's related, and it's important for everyone to get this.
Yeah.
I had a quantum spiritual awakening in 2003, and it woke me up to a lot of, clairvoyance, clairaudience, all forms of communication. And I was going to ask you, because I think the audience would like to know, and we'll get back to this in a second, how you felt the presence. Well, we can answer that now. How did you feel this presence, or what was it for you? When you said when you were young and you felt the presence of ancestors, like how did you know? Because I think the audience would like to know, and I can support you on that with my own experience, but if you could just share that real quick.
Yeah. So as a little girl, I saw shadows and I felt them.
Ah.
I didn't faces, but I could see their it was shadowed, and I couldn't see their faces. I didn't know who they were, and I think I was just too little, but I'm hugely claircognizant, so I just end up with these knowings.
Nice.
And
that's a good one to have.
They're all great.
They're all good, but
So I end up with this knowing, and sometimes it's disorienting. I mean, right. I want to hear the rest of your story.
Okay.
You have this quantum
Okay,
experience.
so I just wanted to, let people, because it's interesting to know to meet healers that have this awareness. Like, how do you know? And in my experience, like, I can have the spirit of living people show up, and I know immediately who it is energetically. I'm like, what are you doing? It's like kind of funny. I'm like, how did I know that? Like, it's a knowingness. It's like something shows up and I know it. So I had a vision, clairvoyant vision, maybe 3 weeks ago. And I keep asking for answers for something that's bothering me. Like, what's in my way? What's in my way of some issues in my life? Like ongoing chronic issues. I'm like, this has got to end. I'm doing all the work. And I see in my third eye 2 giant cement blocks, not cinder blocks. They're more like, the size of a mini storage unit or something. They're big. And then I hear generational.
Yeah.
And I got it today.
Yeah. And
this is leading to this question. This is how I'm going to share the story. So when I was reading your part of your bio, there's something mentioned there that we disown places of shame and drama, and we block ourselves.
Right.
So I want to share that it came to me, this is before my mother has passed 8 years now, but it came to me during a heightened state of awareness very fully that my mother was abused some way. Mm-hmm. I saw the whole thing. I felt it, but I kind of forgot about it. Mm-hmm. And then after she passed, my aunt told me that there was sexual abuse and trauma in the family. And for sure, everyone was a part of it. So kind of reiterated that. And this is for people like, you don't know your parents, like my mother was shamed and traumatized. Why doesn't she love us? We don't understand why she is the way she is until I find out, oh, no wonder. Like she had stuff in her life that was closed down, shut down, shame. I felt all of that coming from her. And I kind of didn't know how to deal with it. And then I blamed, and I didn't want anything to do with her family, nothing, and then when I spoke to my sister, who's a bit of a mystic as well, or a healer, she got information. It's like, it's generational. These blocks is like holding on to that. Like you're saying, like, I don't want any part of that. That's yours, not mine. So maybe you can kind of, And what's interesting is most of us have no clue about what you're talking about. This is new, if you ask me, and I'm in this realm where I would come to me sooner than others. So it's a great time for, if you're going through something in your life that's gone on forever and ever, it could be something like this, like you wouldn't know anything better about. So if you could speak to that, I think that would be helpful to a lot of people. Men too.
Men too, all of us.
Yes.
So You know, the thing for Native people is that we can identify certain things, places, events, historical events that we know happened in certain places. But for a lot of other people, and that makes it somewhat convenient for us to say, we know this is what happened, right? But for other people, it may go back so many generations. It may be so normalized within the family that we don't even know that it's an issue,
I
right?
know. That's a shame.
Identify. It's a shame, but yet at this time, I feel like, you know, part of the gift of what's happening right now um, is that we get the opportunity to heal it. So I kind of just went, oh, should I talk about epigenetics right there? So what we know about epigenetics is that we carry within our DNA trauma. So we talk about cellular memory. So what we know is that everyone has cellular memory. It's what tells our DNA to produce black hair or blonde hair, or dark eyes or blue eyes, right? It tells us how to, you know, move. It informs everything that we do, all of our cells. I was just watching Bruce Lipton talk about that we actually have, we look in the mirror and we see one individual. Really, we have 50,000 cells in our bodies that each act as individuals. We have a community inside of us. We have thousands of ancestors that we carry inside of us. So while we see the one face, there are thousands in our cells. Like literally the memories are in our cells. So when we talk about epigenetics, we know that epigenetics, those genes, and those, that intelligence and those instructions on how those genes work are latent. So they stay dormant until they're triggered, until something happens and it wakes them up and says, okay, now you need to go to work, right? So those negative experiences like abuse or like violence or war or separation are also there. And they stay latent until we have an experience that says, oh, I remember this, right? I remember this. And then it becomes awake, it becomes activated again, okay? So once it's activated, it stays active until something deactivates it or neutralizes it, right? So that's where ancestral healing comes up. But I just want to say here, and this is why, like the rabbit hole, we could talk for hours and hours about this stuff. So, but you know, that's why we see like one family member has depression and the other one doesn't. For whatever reason, this got triggered here and this one didn't. And it may be different, like so it may be that anxiety showed up in this sibling and not in this one, but depression showed up in this one, right? So it's because that DNA got activated in some way, that anyway, there's another word for it that gets activated. So within the epigenetics. So long story short, once that gene that has been activated, that cellular memory has been activated, to neutralize it, so first it has to be activated. We can't just neutralize it before it's become active, okay? So it has to become active. And then once it's here, we can presence it. And it simply is in the process of presencing it that we neutralize it. So it's literally that it wants to be seen. It wants to be, that wound needs to be acknowledged. So I don't know if you have kids, Liz, but you know, I have 2 and I have 5 wonderful grandchildren. And God bless them. You know, if they get a boo-boo, they're going to tell grandma all about it, right? They're going to, look, grandma, look, right here, right? And they're going to tell me all about how that's part of our normal response of how we're supposed to respond to trauma. So normally within a well and intact community, we have places where we can go, look, I got a boo-boo, right? I got a boo-boo. And would you please, you know, kiss it and make it better, right? And then grandmas or grandpas come along and they go, yes, it's better. When I was a little girl, I used to get earaches all the time. And again, this goes back to, you know, like how these things shape us, right? These are stories. We all have stories like this. But I used to get earaches all the time, ear infections, because I have allergies, and in the springtime, this time of the year. And I was sitting there while all of my cousins were out playing out back. I was on the couch with an earache and just miserable. And my grandfather said, "What's wrong with you? And why aren't you playing?" I'm like, I was just in tears. I was in pain. And he came over and he, lit up a cigarette and, Camels at the time, or yeah, it was like, no, Pall Malls it was. He lit up a Pall Mall and then blew that smoke in my ear and prayed over my ear, just that my ear, and it got better,
Wow.
Yeah, it was a really powerful experience, because I had never seen that side of him. I'd never seen that kind of compassion and caring. Not that he was an uncaring guy, but the trauma, he just wasn't intimate. And that's what you're talking about, your mom, right?
Yep.
Because of her experience of abuse, she wasn't able to do that. When we have kind, loving, well elders who are able to do that in our communities, right? We could say, "Oh, there's the boo-boo," and it gets well and it's tended to. For the last 500-700 years, for the most part, most people in the world have not had these kinds of communities where we have well elders who are able to say, "I see you got a boo-boo. Let me help you. Let me take care of you. Let's sit. Tell me what happened," right? So we are becoming that. That's the call, Liz. We're becoming those people, right? So we are becoming wise elders and, well ancestors. That's what this is all about to me. This is what we're doing as part of this ancestral healing. That's why it's spiking. That's why it's growing. We're in a time when we recognize that the solutions that we've come up with thus far aren't it. And there is more. And it requires us. We're the missing piece. We're the missing piece to all of it.
So I want to share, maybe you've read this already, but when I had that spiritual awakening I was telling you about, I was guided to Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsch. You familiar with his books?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea. I had never heard of it before. This was like, it came from a knowingness. Like, I just went to the library one day. I'm like, "Do you have something called this?" And they had it. I'm like, "All right, I guess I need it." And it turned out to be like my best friend and my therapy for the first 6 months or so. But God talks about how we dismiss our elders now. We dismiss our grandparents, where he's like, those are your greatest resources for the kids. Like, you want your kids to be hooking up with your parents. The grandparent and the child is an important and vital kind of relationship that's healing and doing everything that you're talking about. But God brought it up in that conversation. I'm like, whoa, it makes sense, because we as parents aren't really ready for kids. If you're having them at 20, you're not ready. 25, you're not ready spiritually to necessarily handle them. So it was kind of an interesting conversation that kind of reiterates that same suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Straight from God, I'm telling you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I can tell you, when I read that book, it was clearly coming from a higher, I could feel the presence in that book coming to me. I'm like, ooh, there was no denying it.
Yeah. Yeah, it speaks right to your heart. And there is a part of us, all of us, that knows that we know the truth. We know spirit when it's talking. We know that we may not have language for it. Like, as a little girl, I didn't have language that was ancestors,
Yeah.
But it took, a lifetime to be able to put language to all of this, so, and, it's taken us generations, like how many generations to talk about it in our communities, to say, we need to start doing this healing work together.
Right.
So
I'd like you to maybe discuss, like, why would someone want to, we're kind of saying it, but I want you to kind of bring it together. Like, why would someone want to reweave their ancestral story? I mean, what's really the foundation for that? What's the reason for that? And let's bring it into awareness why it matters. So if you could kind of.
It matters. It matters. It matters hugely. It matters hugely. So I guess I would say, you know, Liz, in response to that question, so there's a number of ways that it matters. And it matters on so many fronts that you have no idea. So let me just tell you a story. And I shared this with there's so many stories that I can share, but let me just share with you. I'm trying to think which story I'm going to share.
Okay.
So the story I want to share with you at this moment, I had another one planned, but I'm going to share with you this story. So recently, in the last few years, I got to work with the tribes around the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, which basically is about protecting sacred sites, those sites that are existing with ancient burials and ancient artifacts, right? So that they can't be, damaged or encroached upon with development, right? So that's one of them. And the other thing is repatriating or bringing back those items, the sacred items that were taken, during the Indian Wars, and they were, so people's ancestral remains, bones, as well as baskets and artifacts were taken by museums and institutions and studied, right? So that is all part of families. They're all part of communities. They're all integral parts. And again, going back to what we were talking about, that circle, if our ancestor is missing from that circle, we know that, we feel the emptiness of their, that's they're not in that spot, right? And we need that as part of our circles to be whole, right? We need all of us in that circle. So when I was working with NAGPRA, working with both the baskets and on sacred sites, I had the opportunity to work with a tribal archaeologist. And she and I would work on those sites with burials that are thousands of years old. And we had the opportunity to work on one burial in particular of a woman who we were the first to witness her and to properly bury her. So she was the victim of assault, and she had been traumatized, and her bones were entirely broken, and she had fallen face down in a swamp. And so the tribal archaeologist and I had the honor of singing over her bones and praying for her and praying for her spirit, and sending her spirit on home, because again, her spirit in many ways was creating havoc, saying, did you see my boo-boo? Did you see? I'm hurting. I'm hurting. I'm hurting. I can't go home to my people. Okay. So by us being able to weep together and sharing our stories of our grandmothers where they had been wounded, right? Yeah. And weeping with her, witnessing all that she was creating. What I got to watch as we were doing that, as we were doing both the archaeological work and the spiritual work, is I got to watch how that energy created havoc in the land, in the earth, because that's stored memory. It's cellular memory of the earth, okay? And then, so we know, like Masaru Emoto, right, we know that water stores memory, the earth stores memory as well. So that was in that place. We were walking around that place. I watched as people, men and women fighting. I watched almost a near assault happen right within like 100 feet of this happening. So what I'm saying is that these things happen, they occur until somebody says, I see your boo-boo. I see your boo-boo. And we're gonna pray, and we're gonna look at it, and we're gonna presence this together, and then we can be finished with that. We can be finished. And it repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats in the earth. It repeats in ourselves. It repeats with each other. We reenact. I always say that we are stuck in one heck of a historical reenactment, right? So we reenact these dramas and these traumas with each other unknowingly.
Right. Yeah.
So
when you do
talk,
do you do like group you do a group
yeah.
healing with people and like with families, or what is it? What has your history and experience been there?
Yeah, so what we do is we come into a circle. And just like we've been sharing, we all bring our stories. We bring our ancestors into that circle with us. And all of us together in that circle, you know, we presence those places through story, through art, through song, right? Now, if people know those stories and they want to share that story, they're free to. But these stories are archetypal, right? They're universal to us all. We've all experienced some kind of boo-boo, right? Where we needed somebody to say, I got you. You know, I got you. I see you. I know that you're hurting. And, you know, let's do this together. You know, let's pray into this together. Let's heal this together.
Now, Gemma, I think my sister's done something like this, like it's called like a family constellation. Have you heard, is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's that process. It's the same thing.
It's a similar thing. So family constellations came out of a therapeutic type of background. So it's done as more of a therapeutic type of approach.
Okay.
And that's one of the styles of that is of ancestral healing that is very popular.
Okay.
And that's a wonderful style. There are other styles. I do a more indigenous style because that's where I come from. So I use, in the same way that we, in our ceremonies and in our communities, we use art, story, and ritual. I use in the same way because not only are they fun, and it's fun. It's fun, and it feels like we're just having fun, but really it's wonderful work. So like you had mentioned my art, I do mixed media art because I like to throw in everything in there. So literally I have thrown dirt and ash in with lace, and to talk about those, you know, those stories, you know, and to make something beautiful with it that, you know, and we move through all of those places. We move through the dirt, we move through the ash, we move through the beauty, the lace, right? The tenderness of our ancestors' memories. So we're doing that as we're making mud pies, you know, but we're telling our ancestors' stories, and we're saying, yeah, you know, look at how terrible that was. Look at the boo-boos. And not in a way that's really difficult, but in a way that's, you know, that's heartfelt. You know, it's not the same, you know, people go, oh gosh, I don't want to do all that. But it's not really any different than, you know, like sitting together like we did as kids and playing in the mud and saying, you know, I see you got a boo-boo on your leg. What happened? You know, so, you know, it's that way, you know, it's not, and in large part, to me, you know, Liz, it's so important that we have these conversations. And it's been really, really important to me that everyone know that we're all a part. We're all part of that circle. We're all important to that healing. It is not about being scary or weird or different. It needs to be as normalized and common, whatever your flavor of ancestral healing is, you know, whether you feel, you know, supported in a more clinical type of, you know, therapeutic setting, or whether you know, want to do that, you know, through art and making mud pies, you know, we get to do the whole spectrum of it.
Mud pie, woohoo! I
know, that's what I'm like, I like to, you know, I like to get my hands in the art. And so I do. And sometimes my friends, because I literally use earth pigments. Yeah. So, yeah.
All right. I have a couple of questions I want to ask you there, Gemma. And please, Gemma is the correct pronunciation, or is it Gemma?
It's Gemma. It's okay.
Gemma.
I
meant Gemma. To ask you at the beginning. All right, everyone.
No, that's Gemma,
like
all the time. Yeah.
Although it's spelled with a
I don't
G-M-M-A, you guys. Gemma. Thank you. Yeah. All right. So Well, so let's just have a quickie for the audience so they can get a little more engaged here. What's the most common problem you are helping people with? Like, is there a couple of them that are really stand out? Like a lot of us have this problem and that you're helping people with either, or is it just human suffering, period?
It's human suffering, period. But there is, because of my own background, those stories like your mother's, of abuse, are really very prevalent in my life. There is, and the ancestors that I've gathered up along the way are saying, we see it, we identify it. They bring me people, they bring, I'll be in a grocery store and suddenly, somebody's, it's kind of awkward sometimes. It's kind of weird, but, she's telling me a story, and part
So
of
meaning like someone will come to you and start talking to you?
like we're standing in line, looking at, I'm trying to find something healthy, gluten-free, and we end up talking, and she ends up sharing, and oftentimes it's awkward for them because they're like, I don't know why, and they're crying. I don't know why I'm sharing this with you. I'm going to share, And I'm like,
reassure them, don't worry, I know why you are.
I know why you are, and let's talk. Let's
good.
talk, and you're perfectly safe, and it's perfectly normal, and
okay, cool.
You're not going crazy.
Okay. So what are some like common feelings that people might have that they don't know how to identify? Like that would be like a sign that you need to look at this. Like, for me, it was giant blocks in the word generational, and I still didn't know what it meant. But is there anything that people can kind of feel or tune into or have an awareness of that's pointing at that?
Well, the truth of it is oftentimes people are so used to ignoring it.
I know.
They don't pay attention.
Yes, I know.
The red flag is like when you're right in the middle of it, and it's happening all the time, is when you see those patterns happening over and over again. So when you see, and again, I'll just tell you a brief story here. So my middle granddaughter, God bless her heart, she is amazing, and she was born with a birth genetic disorder. That's what they call it. So she's born with Kabuki syndrome, and so she has some health issues there. And I was on the phone with my son. I was at a site, but I was on the phone with my son, and he was telling me about what was happening at the doctor's earlier that morning, Liz. And I was listening intently so on the sites, I'm in a hard hat, I'm in the jacket, dust is flying everywhere, there's big equipment everywhere, but I'm listening to him because in this moment, his baby girl is hurting, and he's, had this conversation with the doctor to understand that she has a rare congenital anomaly called a butterfly vertebrae. And it's really where the vertebrae is fused together.
Oh.
So it's painful. It's painful. And so he's weeping on the phone with me, telling me that, my granddaughter has this butterfly vertebrae. And so I was listening to him. And about then I noticed that a butterfly went flying by. Oh. And I went, oh, wow, that's interesting. So then we went back to the office, and I was sitting with the archaeologist, and she says, and this is about an hour and a half later, and she says, we're sitting in our office and still in the boots and everything. And she's like, I want to show you something. This is so rare. I've never seen this. I've heard the osteologists talking about the study of bones, talking about this, but I want to show you this because it's just unbelievable. She goes, this is what they call a butterfly vertebrae. And she showed me the ancestral bones, one of a butterfly vertebrae. And I burst into tears.
Whoa.
Burst into tears, Liz, because
that's cool.
It's cool. And still to this day, to be honest with you, I don't understand the full implications of all of it, right? Yeah. All I had to say was, this is what's happening. I see the pattern. I see the relationship. And I don't know what you're trying to tell me here. I don't know the fullness of it, right?
Yeah.
But in that sacred way, what we know is just to hold my hands open. I'm just telling you, bring it. Bring it. Whatever healing you have for my granddaughter,
Yeah.
Bring that. I
That's
will
pretty
carry
huge.
it. I will do it. It's huge. It's huge. But see, and that was just one story that I
Right.
had. If I didn't have a context for it, if I hadn't been part of that healing conversation, asking what is healing all of that time, if I hadn't been part of the ceremonies for all those many years, if I hadn't been immersed in a community with numerous healers talking about some of these things, I wouldn't know what I was talking about.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So we have those experiences similarly in other ways. Maybe not as dramatic, maybe not as clear, right?
Right.
But we have experience like, why are those things happening? You know, what is this pattern in our family? Why do we keep, why, again, and this happens a lot around women, why do I keep attracting the same type of person, right?
Yep.
A lot of that is not just this lifetime. A lot of it has to do with epigenetics and those patterns. So a lot of it has to do with the intimacy that and boundary issues that our parents expressed or didn't express, right? Like what you're talking about with your
Yeah.
mom, right? So because she didn't know how to have safe boundaries and still express love, she was like, I don't know how to deal with you, right? So it was
Exactly.
hands off.
Yeah.
So it's often either one, but those patterns are a red flag. They're like that it's happening. And the beautiful thing is if it's happening and you see it, Liz, you're the missing link. You're the one that gets to be part of the healing. Spirit is giving you everything you need to heal it.
And I did get a lot of information, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, standing in the circle, all of us together, we're going to sing into it. We're going to pray into it. We're going to lean it and hear those stories and then heal it together.
So I'm remembering another mystical moment I had, I just kind of got really interesting.
I thought, okay, yeah.
So my sister is like, I connect with her when I need kind of clarification because, I get a lot of information, but sometimes I got to get out of my way and let's see what someone else is seeing. But during these spiritual awakenings, I've had a lot of states of higher consciousness for ongoing periods of time, met with the opposite of it, which is no fun, let me tell you. But during one of these episodes, I was so frightened. I slept with my mother. I just had to sleep in her bed and I had to hold her hand. And while I was experiencing something, I felt all this energy coming from my mother into my arm and it scared me. Like I was scared. And there was also like this dark presence in the room. And when I spoke to my sister, she said it was like whatever was running through her was generational, going like, she could see the line of generation of something going on. I'm like, whoa, that's kind of cool. Which I didn't really, I'm like, okay, because I think it's safe to say that whatever I've been through is significant.
Yeah.
It's transcendental, whatever is required in this planet. I've been in the face of stuff that I've lived through, which is all of us that live through crap are now carriers of having lived through crap. But anyway, it was
and that's powerful because we understand the wound, right? Because we understand the wound, we know what it takes to heal it.
Right.
Right? We know what it takes. Yeah. So, we then become the wounded healer. We've experienced those things, and that's a powerful place to be. That's a powerful place.
Yes.
And really, when we talk about epigenetics, what we know is if we ourselves, have not experienced the rawness of that wound, our ancestors have, right? It's still that memories inside of us, right? Okay. And especially in this time when we're seeing so much violence, we're seeing all kinds of nutso stuff happening.
Yes.
And we're exposed, through Facebook, through Twitter, through TV, through all of it, right? It's coming, we're getting triggered. And my belief is, Liz, this is like why ancestral healing is so big, because we're here this time to heal it. We're here right now
Yeah.
to heal that.
Cool.
So it's
Sign me up.
powerful stuff. Yeah, me
I've
too.
been through enough to want to step forward and do what I can to end human suffering, because there's ways around it. There's no reason for us to suffer. And, you know, I suffered like ridiculous amounts of suffering that's not of this world. I'm like, okay, God, enough of this crap. You know, enough is enough. So, Gemma, we have so many topics we can cover, and we'll have to schedule
talk forever. Yes.
Together. So I do want to talk about, Gemma has an upcoming event on Saturday, this Saturday, April 27th, 2019, in case, you know, this video is going to be around a while, which doesn't mean you can't always connect with us one way or another. And I at least wanted to get Gemma here in front of our audience so you can connect with her on her website. But let's talk about this upcoming event. It's called Reweaving Your Ancestral Story, Ritual, Story, and Song to Remember the Forgotten, Heal the Past, and Rekindle Belonging. And this is a free online event sponsored by the Shift Network. And the Shift Network has found a true healer here. You don't get on the Shift Network with being a slouch. I think Gemma's got it going on. She knows what she's doing. But she's certainly introducing us to the whole notion of healing our ancestry and the ancestral connection. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what this event, what we can look forward to? Just some quickie bullet points on that one.
Yeah, so on Saturday, we're going to, you know, Stephen Dinan is the founder of the Shift Network, and he approached me about doing this ancestral healing course because of the urgency that we're experiencing right now. And he himself, you know, has a vision about healing the planet and about the way that we get to move forward as a human species, you know, like recovering our relationship with the earth and our humanity and all of that and our leadership. So he has, and I suspect there's more to this, but he has a big vision about leadership as well. And I'm excited to have this conversation with him on Saturday. But the two of us are going to talk about ancestral healing, and we're going to go through, we're going to go talk about some of what we're going to cover in the course.
Okay.
And talk about ancestral healing and talk about, you know, those deep places where, so through the course, we're going to be talking about the places of the forgotten, the lands of the forgotten. And we're going to go, the forgottens are those ancestors with boo-boos.
Okay.
Those ancestors, right? Who have.
For that visual.
Yeah, you know.
Simple.
It is simple,
yes,
right?
It doesn't have to be dramatic.
Have to be dramatic. They have boo-boos, right? And so we're going to, you know, talk about the way those wounds affect all of us, right? So, you know, we're talking about the forgotten so that we can remember our ancestors. Like, it's in the process of remembering our ancestors that they're healed and that we're healed. So when you asked why, you know, on so many levels, there's a mirroring process that happens, much like what, you know, I experienced, you know, when my granddaughter, you know, got news about her, all of that was happening. So she was getting news about her butterfly vertebrae. My son was, you know, crying his tears as a father. I was presencing as a grandmother, and yet the ancestors were, so there's this mirroring, wonderful mirroring that happens with ancestral healing. So we're going to watch, you know, or presence our ancestors' stories, and watch that healing happening with our ancestors and for ourselves and for each other, right? So, and then we're going to go moving through the land of the forgottens, moving into places of belonging and connection. So those wounds, like your grandmother had, part of it is, you know, she never had the opportunity to be seen. Her wound was never seen, right? And that's, so she never got that validation of someone holding her, somebody, you know, speaking to those wounds and like they say, resourcing, like becoming an ally in that situation for her. We're resourced human beings when we have those when we have the support of our ancestors, right, we reclaim their wisdom with the wound, right? So we become then powerful in those ways. So as we move through the land of the forgottens, we're going to be talking about belonging. So we belong to the wisdom of our ancestors. And that's something that, as often as people in, their 40s plus, we have not yet experienced that, right? So belonging and having community and having those places of being seen is part of the gift that our ancestors can give to us and are wanting to give to us. So we move through those places of belonging, we move through those places of expression and finding our significance, showing up in those circles, right? We're moving through those places of separation and loss and not being seen. And really what we're doing, as I mentioned before, is becoming well ancestors. We're becoming resourced, strong, powerful elders, right? For ourselves first, because that's where it starts, right? For ourselves first, so that we begin not only to heal our own wounds, our own emotional, mental, spiritual wounds, and our own physical wounds, right? Because that's the next piece. It's often tied, the epigenetics is often tied to our health issues, and I don't want to go down too far down that rabbit hole.
Right. No, let's not do that.
Let's not do that. But, but there is, significance there, right? So as we're healing these places and we heal our minds, body, and spirits, we're healing our bodies, we become elders, we become knowledgeable, powerful, wise elders, and then becoming, leaving that legacy as we make our transition, way down the road, right? Way down the road, 50 years from now, and we're an ancestor, we can then be a resource to our families and communities. That's a legacy. We're living a legacy of healing as opposed to a legacy of violence and trauma. Nice. So we're going to be talking about all of that in great detail. We're going to be sharing a ritual and sharing a song. Yeah, that's
good. Are you gonna sing?
Goody, we're gonna sing. Yeah, and and so some people, again, and so song is a means of healing. It's a means of working with breath, working with the unseen, and moving that through our bodies and expressing it. So that's one of the ways that the ancestors work with me, and that's one of those things that the ancestors do is they convey healing as I sing. They express that. So, yeah.
All right. So if you're interested in attending this, it sounds like it's going to be a nice healing event with the founder of the Shift Network, who has a huge vision for healing the planet. And I'm all for that. So if you go to the mindbodyspiritnetwork.com/ancestors or ancestor, either one will work, you can register for Gemma's webinar that's coming up. If you can't make the webinar on Saturday, April 27th, no worries, there'll be a recording. And it's all leading up to a class, so I'm sure she's going to be an incredible teacher. And the class isn't going to start till like mid-May or so. So if you miss all of this, because this recording is going to be out there, after this fact, there'll be links to Gemma's website, because she will have access to her own courses that you can purchase there, and you can stay connected with her there or through the mindbodyspiritnetwork.com. And I do want to share something with our audience. If you go to Gemma's website, which is GemmaBenton.com, and I'll have it here on the screen so you can see it, she has these beautiful mixed media oracle cards. I'm a huge fan of a beautiful artwork, woman. I love it.
Oh, thank you.
And I'd highly recommend, I want to get a set of those. Those are beautiful. I love them. And she also has this great opportunity to opt in for her 30 days journaling with your ancestors. And she provides these journaling prompts to get you kind of moving. Could you tell us a little bit about that, Gemma? That's a nice way to get started working with you.
Yeah. So it's a great way to, if you're not ready to do the course for whatever reason,
Yes.
We'll be doing it again, and we'll be doing the Ancestors Journey again. But in between that, it's nice because there's a reason why your ancestors are connecting with you now, right? Something is going on, and it's important that we pay attention. Like we're saying, we're listening, right?
Yes.
So the prompts are a way to move into that conversation. So there's 30 prompts. Each of them are designed to just have you sit, whether you write through journaling or just to visualize. Some people don't like writing, but they can just visualize that and sit with their ancestors for a minute, 5 minutes, as whatever time you have, but making it a practice over 30 days so that that conversation is growing, and so what we know, and with your gifts, your clairaudience and your claircognizance and all that stuff. Clairs, all that stuff, right? It's the more you use it, the more you're listening, the more you practice, the more you become available, the stronger it gets. So after 30 days of doing, sitting with those ancestors, you're getting clarity about what's happening, what you are really needing, and what they're asking you to do in your life, right? And how they can be available to you. So the truth is, we have all of these fancy words and all of these fancy programs, but really, when it comes down to it, you have your connection with your ancestors. You are an automatic link with your ancestors, and they are the ones that you need to work with.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So really as simple as becoming available to them, like making time with them. So that's one way. It's free. It's just an easy way to say yes to your ancestors and yes to the whole conversation. So I'm excited.
Okay, one last question, then I'm going to let you go. Do you work with people one-on-one or families or groups, or what do you do in that regard?
I do mostly group work because there's so much. And here's the thing, Liz, I do some private work, but there is a dynamic that happens when we're together as a group, right? That is so rich.
Yes.
Like just in the conversation that happened today between you and I, beautiful things emerged.
Yeah.
That happens when we're in groups. It doesn't
happen
much when we're alone, And so to me, when we bring a group of people together, that's part of that healing, that circle. It's like we're meant to do it all. And it's part of the support. So I do mostly groups.
Okay. Yeah. That's good to know. Have you done remote groups, like on Zoom?
I have.
Okay,
cool. Absolutely.
Because I do a Zoom online meetup group, and I find groups really powerful.
Yeah.
Really powerful.
And with the technology, if people can just get on, right? It's almost like we're sitting here.
Yeah, it's not that hard, really.
It's really not that hard, but they get intimidated, right? So
it's
like, if we can just get here, we find that, it's really kind of convenient, and it's
super convenient.
Super
get a lot done. Yeah.
Get a lot done. And it's like we're face to face. It's almost as if, right? I can't give you a hug, but know that I
felt hugged.
Yeah, good.
Good.
Because I said you was. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, listeners and followers of the Mind Body Spirit Network, this is called our High Vibe Tribe, bringing an expert Q&A interview. And by high vibe, I mean higher consciousness, higher frequency healer types that are aligned with awakening and healing the world. That's why I call them the High Vibe Tribe. Gemma, namaste, my love. Thank you for coming here.